Happy Sunday to you, college football fans. Welcome to the first and long college football show. We are so glad that you are here to talk some college football with us today. We didn't necessarily announce it last week earlier this week whenever we had our live show that we'd be doing another one this Sunday, but there's so much college football news going on, even in this so-called off season. It's got me and Mason nice and busy. That's how we like it. Plenty of college football to talk about. So let's all get together and do that. Hit that like button for us if you are enjoying the show and ready for next season, man. It's going to be here before we know it. These off seasons get shorter and shorter. Mason, how are you today? It's the 21st of January and we're jam packed. How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And welcome Instagram. This is our first time on Instagram, so welcome.
Man, Instagram
Give us a
Live.
like. Let us know who's out there watching on Instagram. We really appreciate it.
I think they already gave us a thumbs down, but that's
we
all
did
right.
get a thumbs down for the late start, so we deserve that. That's on us.
Eventually, we're gonna have a producer in here, and then we'll be able to blame that shit on them.
Yeah,
But this time it was on us.
That's right. That's right. But hey, we got a lot to talk about. Since Wednesday, we did hear from Caleb Downs. I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on that, and what that means for the Ohio State football program in 2024. Also staying in the Big Ten. What's Jim Harbaugh doing these days? What's he thinking? Where's he going to be come next year? Did he coach his last game of college football? Let's dive into that. And then at the end of the show, I want to see what your thoughts are for your top 10 this year, and I'm going to give you my thoughts as well.
Yeah, we did our way too early reaction to the ESPN way too early top 25 on our last episode. You can go check that out after this show's over. Don't go anywhere right now, but go check that out later on, and you can kind of see what ESPN was thinking. But today we'll give you our top 10. That'll be fun. But let's start off with the Caleb Downs news. Caleb Downs does end up committing to Ohio State. Now, if you watched the show earlier this week, me and Mason were and we weren't the only ones. Apparently, all the coaches and everything at University of Georgia were under the thought that Caleb Downs was coming to Georgia. It was going to be a situation where he'd be moving in immediately. They already had the Georgia Board of Education, or whatever you want to call it, pulling their strings to get him in the classes because technically he was late. Getting into classes and things because of that late transfer portal coming out of Alabama. But Ohio State comes in with the bag, buddy. They gave him some money. They offered him, from what I understand, over twice as much as what Georgia was offering. And Georgia could not counter offer. And lo and behold, the best transfer portal player of this class and maybe ever is now headed to Ohio State to play safety. This was a shocker, obviously, because we were already, like we said, we were already saying he was going to Georgia. I mean, literally, he was out looking for apartments whenever this all happened. The Downs family had already met with Georgia, agreed to everything. So it was a big shocker to us and all the coaching staff and everything. What are your thoughts? And then we'll kind of transition into what this means for Ohio State.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's not too often that we get these specific details on how a transfer portal player came to be at a certain university. But in this case, we know pretty much exactly what happened. Caleb Downs was planning on coming to Georgia whenever his dad came out and said, yeah, we'll make a decision within 48 hours. Georgia was on their mind. Right. They had already figured out, hey, we're going to Georgia. We're going to go follow Travarius Robinson, the safeties coach at Georgia now that moved over from Alabama. We're going to follow him to Georgia. We're going to go to Georgia. We're going to win a ring. And it's going to be, a great experience for him and for Caleb. And everything seems fine and dandy.
The best secondary ever, right?
Exactly. And what happened was, Ohio State called at the 11th hour and said, look, we're going to give you $1.2 million. And who in their right mind, I don't blame the kid at all for turning down $500,000 to make $1.2 million, right? Raise your hand if you do. Let me know if you think he made the wrong decision. But this wasn't a football decision. This was a financial decision. Sometimes the two aren't always, um, sometimes the two run parallel to each other. They're not always conjoined, right? So in this case, he had to get on the other side of the track and say, I got to take care of me and my future. And Georgia wasn't able to counter. They weren't able to say, hey, we'll bump it up from I think it was 500, maybe just a little under 500,000 to even he probably would have taken 900,000 if they could get to that range, but Georgia said no. We've sort of maxed out our offer. We're not going to be able to match that. And again, I don't blame the kid. That's a lot of money to leave on the table for 2 years in college.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he's going to go make Ohio State a better program. We can get into that, but this was Caleb Downs' decision. We pretty much know exactly what happened, and we were right, I think, on Wednesday in saying he's going to Georgia. And he would
thought he was going to Georgia on Wednesday.
Exactly. So I think we were on it, and things just turned, and that's the volatility of the transfer portal these days and of an 18-year-old's mind.
Well, if we're wrong, we'll be the first ones to tell you we were wrong, and we were wrong on this one. But look, I don't blame him for taking that money. I'm a Georgia fan. Okay, I've got a Georgia sweatshirt on here, but I'm a fan of college football more so. And if I'm a player and Georgia's offering me 550,000 and Florida's offering me 1.2 million, I'm not a rich man, Mason. I'm gonna have to go down to Florida and get that extra money, dude. Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a business decision. It's not even, even if Caleb Downs comes from money, his dad played at the NFL. He was a running back for 3 different
yeah,
NFL teams. His brother is in the NFL. So like they have money. But
yeah,
when you're a business person and you have a chance to sell a product for one price and then you have a chance to sell it somewhere else for twice as much, you're going to choose the other option,
yeah.
even if you have a relationship with your current vendor who's selling it for the lesser amount. It's a good business decision. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
and you're not missing out on anything either because I mean you're going to Ohio State. You're going to have all the eyes are still going to be on you. I mean, it really is a good business decision. And now on the other hand of that, for Georgia, I think it was also a pretty shrewd business decision because look how stacked you already are in that secondary. You can't go and spend $1 million on a player. You're not worried about that position. So you can't justify it. I mean, these colleges are not money printers, and this NIL situation is still new. It's not slap full of a war chest coffer. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? With $100 million in it.
So
That's not where we are right now.
let me ask you, do you think if Georgia didn't get Caleb, or excuse me, did not get KJ Bolden in this recruiting class, if
They
they
absolutely would have.
they go a little bit harder for Caleb Downs, you think?
Absolutely, because that was literally the difference in the money was KJ Bolden's money.
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
what
if
I
you
think.
really sit and think about it,
Mhm.
that was the difference in that position. I feel like Georgia's almost got it down to per position like a budget. Like,
Yeah.
okay, we got X amount of dollars to spend at tight end because we already have 3 tight ends, that we
Mhm.
want to see play over the next 3 years. So we have X amount of dollars, but we needed a running back. Trevor Etienne got paid more because we needed a running back. I mean, Georgia has some very specific needs, and that's how they're going to allot their dollar to meet those needs. And
Well,
and so here we are, folks. This is 2024. This is how college football works now.
yeah, and you can even go further back. They didn't offer KJ Bolden a committable offer by his standards until Dylan Raiola decommits from
Right.
Georgia.
Right.
So, you could really trace it all the way back to there. And, had KJ chosen Auburn, Georgia's probably sitting with Caleb Downs. So, you just never know when in recruiting wins and losses, how things are going to trickle down and
No.
how things are going to take effect. And who knows, KJ Bolden may end up being as good as Caleb Downs, in a couple of years. I don't think he's ready right now. I don't think he'll have an impact like Caleb Downs had last year for Alabama. Nobody's
Yeah.
really nobody's really saying that. That was a pretty remarkable freshman season. But at the end of the day, Georgia misses out on Caleb Downs, and Ohio State's better for it.
Well, speaking of Ohio State being better for it, what does the 2024 season look like for Ohio State? With this news, um, you know, we'll kind of dress this thing out. Ohio State is 53-8 the past 5 seasons. They got 2 Big Ten titles and 3 college football playoff appearances. We're now expanding to a 12-team playoff where Ohio State is going to have just as good a chance as anybody of making the playoffs every single year. Now, the Big Ten gets a little bit harder, but this is a team that retained a lot of their talent on a really, really good defense last year already. And then you're going to add a guy like Caleb Downs to this defense. I think that is obviously it's a net gain on any team. But with it already being a stout defense, I think we're going to see a ground and pound attack a little bit from Ohio State. You got Will Howard coming in and Bill O'Brien coming in to coach that offense. He's going to be calling the plays. And we'll kind of start with Will Howard here. 61.3% completion last year, 2,643 yards, 24 TDs, and 10 interceptions. Will Howard doesn't seem to me to be a prototypical Ohio State quarterback. This seems like a kind of a weird match here. And you've got the freshman Aaron Nolan coming in. We don't really know what Julian Sayan's doing right now. We're trying to figure that out. And if you don't know, Julian Sayin is a 2024 high school quarterback coming out of the 24 class. 5-star guy, was committed and signed to Alabama until Nick Saban retired. So he's now in the transfer portal. He's a college football transfer that has never played in a college football game or anything. So we're going to have to see where he goes because we're hearing some rumors maybe Ohio State for him. But this Will Howard thing just seems peculiar to me because, I don't know, 61.3% completion is the best season he's ever had. He's played in 4 seasons at Kansas State. And I just think that they're going to have to rely on these running backs. They bring in Judkins from Ole Miss. That is obviously going to be the best player on this offense. Davion Henderson has decided to come back, right? Didn't he say he's coming back now?
Yep, he is.
So
who's a great number 2, by the way. I don't think he's a number 1 running back, but I think he's an excellent option as a number 2 running back.
They're going to have a hell of a 1-2 punch. They don't lose a lot on the offensive line. I think they're going to retain pretty much all of that talent and be able to grow with that offensive line. I'm just interested to see how they adapt. They lose Marvin Harrison at wide receiver. Is Jeremiah Smith going to be able to get up to speed? You're going to need a playmaker in this passing offense to help Will Howard out. I don't know, man. Bill O'Brien, pull up the numbers on him, dude. 39.9 points per game in 21, 41.4 points per game in 22. Those were both top 6 in the country, both of those years. I didn't realize how good that was, but you got to remember something. He had Bryce Young. One of those years, Bryce Young won the Heisman.
But with no wide receivers.
In 21, they had some.
In 21, they had some, but in 22,
they didn't. It wasn't near as good of a season for. But I mean, still 39.9 points per game. I mean, in 22, it was 41.4. It actually went up.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
It's absolutely insane. My thing here with Bill O'Brien, I know he's getting a lot of flack from college football fans, from Alabama fans who are saying, well, he's your problem now. And to me, I know he had struggles in New England with Mac freaking Jones, who's not an NFL quarterback. But you mentioned what he did in 21 and 22. I think that was pretty incredible. And he had pretty good receivers in 21 with Mechie and Jamison Williams, but not the stock of receivers that he's going to walk into at Ohio State. Nobody stacks receiver talent like Ohio State does, and they're going to have it again this year. I know you're missing Marvin Harrison. Look, Jeremiah Smith is the next Marvin Harrison. I promise you. Is he going to show it right away? Year one, probably not, but he will get some attention and some playing time. Not to mention Brandon Ennis, who's still there, and multiple others. They've got 5 stars on 5 stars at wide receiver. Now,
Mhm.
that's Bill O'Brien, who's going to have the best receiving talent that he's ever had. Couple that with Will Howard, who's the best receiver he's ever had to throw to at Kansas State. I can't name one. I literally cannot name one. Deuce
Mhm.
Vaughn was probably his best receiving option coming out of the backfield at Kansas State. So I think that has a lot to do with a 61.3%, career completion percentage on top of, having to play kind of early at Kansas State. I think that doesn't always benefit a quarterback's numbers, but you know, I think that he's an upgrade at the quarterback position from Kyle Honda McCord, and I think that Bill O'Brien is an upgrade at the play calling position from Ryan Day. Right? I know that Brian Hartline was the co-offensive coordinator. Well, guess what? He wasn't calling plays last year. He's
No.
still the co-offensive coordinator, and we know that Bill O'Brien's stepping in to call plays. So I think this is Ryan Day, kind of taking his hands off the reins and saying, I'm going to let somebody else handle the offense. And I think it's going to be a good thing. I really do. I think is it the best? Is Bill O'Brien the best play caller in college football? Probably not. But I do think that overall, this is an upgrade at the quarterback position and an upgrade at the play calling position for Ohio State. And that's
Yeah,
how I feel, at least on the offense.
I think that he's going to have to change some things up to fit this team, and I think obviously Ohio State has recruited wide receivers very well. I feel like there's maybe going to be a few games to kind of get into things and get their feet wet to get these wide receivers going. Gonna have to rely on the running game. Didn't do a great job producing a lot in the run game at Alabama those 2 years. Um, Only averaged about 150 yards a game, which isn't just horrible, but I think you're going to need more out of your rushing attack if you're Ohio State this year, just at least in those first few games to get Will Howard going in this offense. And it'll be interesting to see, no doubt about it. Um, let's kind of go up north, that team up north, um, and let's talk about the future of Jim Harbaugh. So I'm interested to see what you think. Harbaugh has interviewed with the Falcons and the Chargers. He has a contract on the table for Michigan. It's looking like the Atlanta Falcons are leaning towards Belichick, right?
I
Um,
think so.
and the Chargers, I feel like, are trying to be a little cheap. I don't know that they're going to be able to offer what he's making at Michigan. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that. What are your thoughts on the Harbaugh thing? Are we on the same page on that? Because about an hour ago, I was reading that they're just wondering. It seems like the Chargers are kind of pussyfooting around about handing the bag. So,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts?
I feel like we're not gonna know anything until after the playoffs, or at least sometime during the playoffs. I'm not look, you and I do college football for a living, so we don't get to cover the NFL
Yeah.
as much. It makes it a little bit tough when it comes to coaching searches and things like that. But ultimately,
Hmm.
with Michigan, I think that they're suffering because once again, because Harbaugh is trying to figure out what he's doing, right? And he knows what he wants to do. He wants to go to the NFL. It's pretty clear to me that he wants to go to the NFL.
Yeah.
Is he going to get that offer? I'm uncertain. It looks like Carolina did not interview him, and that's a little bit interesting. But not interviewed by Carolina. Is Atlanta really thinking about Jim Harbaugh? Sounds like if they can get Belichick, they'd rather have him. And San Diego, I think, or LA, the Chargers now. I think that they're going to be the landing spot for Jim Harbaugh if he ends up going to the NFL. Which again, I think he just needs a committable offer, and he is going to head off to the NFL and leave Michigan behind.
Yeah.
But ultimately, my thing is Michigan has done nothing in the transfer portal. right? They've lost like 5 or 6 players. Nobody too important. They did lose one pretty notable cornerback, but nobody too important. But they've only gained 2 players in the transfer portal, so they're not really doing much. They're just kind of stagnant, waiting to figure out what Jim Harbaugh is going to do, and that's the downside to all this. Harbaugh deserves to get what he wants as far as a head coaching job, but it's coming at the detriment of the Michigan program once again, who's already losing a lot on offense.
Yeah. Yeah, they are definitely. Um, if he does go to the NFL, I'm not sure that he will, but if he does, surely it's going to be Sharon Moore, right?
That's what I'm thinking. I
Taking
think that's
over.
that's the natural next question is who next after the the coaching carousel
Yeah, it's over.
has already stopped.
Yeah.
It ended when Nick Saban retired, and the dominoes kind of fell from there, and that kind of ended at Arizona. Essentially for the most part, but
Yeah.
now I think Sherrod Moore's the best option. I think he's ready to be a head coach, and why not give him a chance if you're Michigan? What do you have to lose? You have somewhat of a cheap hire, right? You're not going out and getting some national champion, former national champion. Outside of that, I think that if Michigan says that's not good enough, we need a proven head coach. I think the first call that you make is to Brian Kelly, and
Mm.
naturally, I think that he's kind of from that northern area. I think that he would be a good fit. I don't think that he would go up there and misuse the word family like he did a couple of years ago with LSU. But Hart, I mean, but Brian Kelly, I mean, he's had some success at LSU. Is he going to want to give up that opportunity in the South in a recruiting hotbed in the SEC to go to Michigan? I think that maybe financially it would make a little bit of sense going to a Big Ten school that's being paid more next year than the SEC schools are. Maybe they can offer more. I don't know if money would play that much of a factor in his decision or not, but I think that he would be your best option as far as fit. If you know if you're just asking me to pick a good fit for Michigan's head coach outside of Jim Harbaugh, of course.
Well, let's kind of talk about the scenario with Jim if he stays at Michigan. So he has, while he's been interviewing for these other jobs, he has been working this Michigan contract, and he's had this contract on the table for a while now that he could sign, extend himself at Michigan. It'd make him, if not the highest paid, one of the top 5 highest paid. I think it's $11.5 million a year, something like that, something to that effect, around 12 million, um, which is insane to be a college football coach. But I digress. Um, he is now wanting immunity built into this contract. And basically, what he's wanting immunity from is all of the level 1 and 2 violations that have occurred over the last 2 years. All of those investigations are still pending. So they Michigan self-imposed a multiple game suspension for multiple different situations. They have fired coaches that were, you know, that some of this stuff was going on. It really has been pretty tumultuous at Michigan, as everyone knows. But for him to get immunity to not be fired by the AD for cause is really a groundbreaking thing. And if this works out for him, expect to see this in coaching contracts going forward. Now, he can still be fired for performance, but he will no longer be liable for anything other than performance and basically his record. That would be the only thing you could fire him for. So his entire contract is guaranteed with the full buyout, all that stuff, no matter what happens. You think that that's fair? Because I mean, I guess if both parties agree to it, it's fair, I guess. But um, it are his hands clean in this situation?
I It's just so weird. I've never heard of anything like this in any sport. It's such a weird negotiation to have to say, look, that's like me being hired as the CEO of a company and saying, if the FTC comes after us, I'm not liable, right? like, wait, what? No, you are liable. You're the head of our
That's like the
program,
situation we need you for.
right? Actually just steer clear of any violations. Like that's really what we need you to do. Is work within the system, create the most competitive advantages that you can within the system, and don't violate anything. That's what we need you to do. And we're not.
Yeah.
If I'm Michigan, that this is what I'm saying. We're not going to build in a clause where you can just kind of every time something like this comes up, just exit the room and not answer questions. That's not how it's going to go. That doesn't make sense to me, and I think that Michigan probably feels the same way, or else they'd probably already have a contract extension offered.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody knows that there is stuff coming down the pipe, and you got right down at Florida State, you've got a situation where they're being punished for an NIL situation, and so I just feel like if this goes through, you're just kind of opening up the can of worms for all these coaches to just do whatever they want to do, and they're not liable for it. And you will see somebody wreck a program because the NCAA is going to hold the program responsible no matter what. So we'll see what happens with Jim Harbaugh. I personally feel like he's going to be back at Michigan now. The longer this goes on, the more I feel like he's going to be back at Michigan. So maybe I'm wrong on that. Um, yeah, I don't. I think he wants too much control over these NFL teams. He wants to be
Right.
the coach and the GM, basically. Like he wants to call all the shots. He wants to be a part of the player acquisition stuff. And I don't know that these NFL teams want that, dude. These
No.
billionaire owners don't want that stuff. I
It-
mean, they want chain of command. They want people working for them and in a front office, giving the players down the pipe to the coaching and the coaches working on developing these guys out of school and I don't know. I don't know if anybody's wanting that smoke with Jim.
yeah. Yeah, I agree, and it sounds like he wants to be a college football head coach. If you want all of that free reign, you've got to be a college football head coach. That's and
Yeah.
that's usually exactly what drives people away from being a head coach in college is having all of this responsibility and being and having so much time consumed in it. College football coaching is year round, whereas in the NFL, you've got the draft, but in between the draft and really, I mean, in between the draft and fall camp, you're pretty much just kind of planning.
Hmm.
Um, it's a pretty sweet schedule, and to not have to recruit year round like the college football coaches do. That's typically the appeal. But Harbaugh, wants his hands in everything. He wants to continue to stay on this college football coaching style of grind in the NFL, and NFL teams are saying, like, look, we got people to handle that. We need you to use more analytics when it comes to drafting players um
Hmm.
and all these things that he's probably not used to. He wants to take more of an old fashioned approach. So I'm with you. I think that the longer this drags out, the more likely he is to stay at Michigan, which is going to be quite awkward, I think, when all of these NCAA investigations and allegations go on and are held, and Jim Harbaugh is going to be the one there holding the bag. He's not going to get out of any of that.
Well, if he'll take a discount, he can go to the NFL. I mean, he can do it. The Chargers will definitely take him. But I just can't see a world in which he's making that move and making the same amount or more money. I just can't see it. I don't know. The NFL is a different beast, and we'll see. And he's been successful at that level, no doubt about it. So we know he can win there. Um, let's go on to our way too early top tens. Um, you wanna lead us off? You got yours ready?
Yeah, I do.
You wanna
I'm just
do you
I'm
wanna
just
do
gonna
10
go.
through 6,
I'll go
and then
ahead
I'll
and give you all 10 of mine,
All right.
and then I'll let you kind of rebut and give me some of your interests. So at number 10, I've got Penn State coming in. This is a program who had a great defense last year. Couldn't figure things out on offense, but I've come to expect them to continue to do that year in and year out on the defensive side of the football. They've also made changes at offensive coordinator and DC. So James Franklin wasn't happy with the output last year, so he made some changes there. They get both running backs back, and also Drew Aller is going to be his second season at the helm, at least with Penn State. And I'm excited to see what he's able to do, but he's going to have to take a big step forward if they want to be competitive in the Big Ten. At number 9, I've got Oklahoma. I'm excited to see Jackson Arnold at quarterback. I thought that he looked really good in the limited time that we got to see him last season. I think he's ready to take over as the quarterback, and I think he's going to step in and be a top half quarterback in the SEC right away, at least. But he has a ceiling that could put him into like the first round eventually once he's able to declare for the draft. Not much attrition going on with Oklahoma, so let's kind of see if they're able to add to what they've already got, but not a whole lot going out, at least. And they also had a change at co-defensive coordinator from Ted Roof to Zach Alley. Brent Venables was not happy apparently with the tackling and some of the situational type stuff at Oklahoma, so he does make a change there. At number 8, I've got Notre Dame, and for me, we've seen Notre Dame this offseason make some changes. I think the biggest change that they made was to go get the offensive coordinator from LSU, Mike Denbrock. I know that Riley Leonard was a huge quarterback addition in the transfer portal, but adding Mike Denbrock was absolutely massive for this program. I'm anxious to see what he does with the talent that he has at receiver. We didn't see a whole lot of the receivers being used last season, even with Sam Hartman. Now you bring in Riley Leonard, who is known as a running quarterback, and I'm curious to see if Mike Denbrock is kind of changing what he wants to do on offense to fit, the Notre Dame offense. You've only got 1 year with Riley Leonard. How are they going to make the most out of that? Also transferring in from Duke is RJ Oben at edge. He's a big addition, and ultimately for Notre Dame, I just want to see what they're able to do at wide receiver and on the outside with Riley Leonard and Mike Denbrock before I put them any higher. At number 7, I've got Missouri. This is the team that beat number 2 on my list, Ohio State. I'll go ahead and give you that in the Cotton Bowl this year, right? Luther Burden in year 3 and Brady Cook returning will be huge for this offense, but losing Schrader is going to hurt. They replaced Schrader with a Georgia State running back. We don't really know what he's going to look like in the SEC, but Schrader was a playmaker. He was one of the best playmakers in the SEC last season. How much of an effect is that going to have on Missouri? They also added an offensive lineman to help in the run game and recruited the number 1 defensive lineman, Williams Nwaneri, out of the state of Missouri. So he should help shore up that defensive front. Ultimately, I think that, Luther Burden's got to be the biggest playmaker. He's got to have the biggest season he's ever had for Missouri to make a push for the playoff this season, with Texas and Oklahoma stepping into the SEC. Their schedule gets a lot tougher. If they want to improve from what they had last year in 2023, they've got to, we've got to see Luther Burden be a huge part of that. Number 6, the team we were just talking about, Michigan, losing a lot on offense. McCarthy is the most notable because I think that he could have come back and really done himself a favor and could have learned a lot and benefited from another season. But he decides to forego that extra season, enter the NFL draft. And also, of course, Blake Corum, he was their best running back, probably their best offensive player in general. And at wide receiver, Roman Wilson, easily their best wide receiver. That was a huge loss for them. How are they going to bounce back from that? They tend to have a great offensive line year in and year out, but they're losing some weapons around that offensive line. So, what are they going to be able to do on offense? That's kind of the big question here for me. I mentioned earlier they haven't really used the transfer portal very much, and I think that once the decision for Harbaugh is made, maybe they hit the portal a little bit harder. But right now, they're just remaining stagnant, and it's kind of tough to watch for the reigning national champions. At number 5, I've got Ole Miss. Ole Miss all the way up to number 5. It's hard to believe that they've made the changes that they have and have improved their roster so much that they're already a top 5 team, right? Preseason top 5 at least. So this year they loaded up this offseason on the defensive side of the ball in the transfer portal. They got Walter Nolan, who's just an absolute stud from Texas A&M, 5-star interior defensive lineman. Also get Prince Yu from Florida off of their defensive line. He's an edge player, a huge get for them there. And they replaced the loss of Judkins, who's headed up to Ohio State, with Logan Diggs from LSU. And Judkins is kind of irreplaceable. I think he's a really good running back, but Logan Diggs was the best option that you could have done there, hands down. I think he's going to come in and do what you need him to do. Pair him up with Ulysses Bentley. He's going to do just fine in this offense. And staying on offense, Juice Wells, if he stays healthy, he's coming over from South Carolina. I think he's a big addition, and couple him with Trey Harris, who's coming back. So I'm excited to see what the Ole Miss offense is going to do. But defensively, they just loaded up in the portal. And so the question to me is, Kiffin's shown an ability to coach. He's done well with less players in a lot of cases. Well, now he's got as good a lineup as most teams in the SEC at least. So what is he going to do with that? And the big question is whether or not he can get the team to come together and gel. But if he does that, this team will be very dangerous. At number 4, I've got Texas. I've got the Longhorns. They could be higher. I think on some lists you could see them as high as 2. But for me, the biggest question mark is Quinn Ewers coming back. And ultimately, I just haven't been too impressed with him. He's been up and down. He's had good games and bad games, and he's been injured a lot in his career. So if he takes a step forward, this is a team that can go win the national championship, right? But I've got to see it before I'm ready to put them up and claim them as a national championship favorite in my eyes. And in the transfer portal, they've loaded up. They've gotten Isaiah Bond, Nye Black, and Blackshire from Blackshire, from Alabama, plus Bolden and Golden at wide receiver, and elite defensive players in Trey Moore and Andrew Makuba. The players transferring out are not really all that. They haven't had a whole lot of playing time, and they weren't all that important players, just depth pieces. So they're not losing a ton on in the transfer portal. And Texas, to me, is just a team that's coming into the SEC. They have a chance to win it all, to win the SEC, to win the national championship. I think that a lot is riding on Quinn Ewers. And by the way, they have a really good backup in Arch Manning, who's got a lot of pressure on him as well. So if Quinn Ewers isn't able to get the job done at quarterback, we'll see what Arch Manning can do. At number 3, I've got Oregon, the Ducks. Third year under Lanning. He's still learning how to be a head coach. Made some mistakes that cost them at least one win last year. But in the transfer portal, they get Evan Stewart, who is probably their biggest add. But also at quarterback, they bring in Dylan Gabriel from Oklahoma and Dante Moore from UCLA, kind of as insurance for the veteran quarterback in Dylan Gabriel. They also add some pieces on defense as well in the portal, and I have a feeling that they're not done there. Big NIL package in Oregon, in Eugene. So I'm anxious to see what they're able to do. They're going to utilize that this year and try to be a contender in the Big Ten in their first year. At number 2, obviously, it's Ohio State, right? For starters, they just got Caleb Downs, possibly the best safety in college football. And he's gonna play a major factor on defense, and also in the punt return and kick and return game. Heck, he might even take some snaps on the offensive side of the football. This guy's a playmaker. I'm anxious to see what he does at Ohio State, but he's going to join Jim Knowles at who's the defensive coordinator for Ohio State. And Jim Knowles is returning basically everybody on defense, and Downs now allows him to play in a 4-3-4 or a 4-2-5 if he wants. So you can add some extra packages as well. And Will Howard is coming in to replace McCord. I'm anxious to see what he does. With the wide receiver weapons that we mentioned earlier, he's got more weapons than he's ever had. Same with Bill O'Brien, right? More weapons than he's ever had. I think that they upgrade at wide receiver and play calling, and also Quinshon Judkins comes in as the a 3-down back. To pair him with Henderson, I think is a great 1-2 punch. And at number one, look, this team's going to be number one on most preseason top 25 list. It's Georgia, right? This is the team that maybe should have won the national championship last year had they gotten a shot. They bring back most of their defense. They replace what they lost in the secondary with very talented young players. Carson Beck, for me, is my pick for the Heisman this season, just given what we've seen from him and what we think that this offense will be coming up in this 2024 season. And then add in Trevor Etienne, who's a dynamic back, a much needed dynamic back in this Georgia backfield. He's going to be running behind one of the best offensive lines in the country. They also brought in London Humphreys, Colby Young, and Michael Jackson at wide receiver. This is all these players will get some playing time, but ultimately this will add to the depth and give my Heisman pick for the season, Carson Beck, some weapons to work with. So that's my long-winded answer there for you, Mark. You certainly don't have to go in as much depth as I did for your picks, but I am anxious to hear what your top 10 are.
Yeah, I like a lot of that. I don't have Oklahoma on my top 10. But I was very close to putting them in there. I am a little concerned with losing the offensive coordinator. This was a really good offense last year, top 10 in the country in pretty much every category you want to look at. But if Oklahoma's defense can step up and stop the run at least 25% better or 20% better, which would be a big jump, but it can be done considering the amount of yards they were giving up on the ground last year. I mean, this was the poorest defense for running attacks. That's why they struggled with teams like UCF and other teams that were able to run the ball effectively on them for 200-300 yards. So if Oklahoma can get that fixed, I think that they can definitely be in this top 10. I've got Florida State at number 10. I think, and there's a couple of reasons for this, and I don't know that maybe they're going to beat, you know, all these other teams that are top 20-ish. I don't know that. Power rating wise, they're probably not, going to be winning those games, but they play in the ACC, man. ACC is just the level of competition is just not very good. I'm sorry. It's just not. Maybe it improves some this year and we have some shocker teams or something like that. It seems like Georgia Tech is getting better. But you're bringing in Cal and Stanford and SMU. SMU is going to be a decent ball club, but Cal and Stanford are not bringing a whole lot to the ACC as far as competition level. I just think Florida State is doing really good on the transfer portal trail again. They're poaching all kinds of Alabama players, 5 or 6 of them now. So I think Florida State's going to be fine. DJU comes in to play quarterback. I think that that's actually a pretty decent fit. They're just going to have to figure out some things on offense. They lost those great transfer portal wide receivers that they had from last year. Going to have to replace those guys. Cam Rising in Utah, I've got at number 9. I think this is a team that they were just missing their quarterback last year, man. They did not have a quarterback. They're going to be good on defense. They're going to be damn good on the line of scrimmage. They've got a pretty damn good playmaker wide receiver coming in. They've already got one on campus in Vele. I think that Utah stands a really good chance. And they're leaving the Pac-12 and they're headed to an easier conference, in my opinion, at least easier than what it was last year.
Yeah.
So I think Utah stands a really good chance of cruising up into that top 10. At number 8, I've got LSU. And here's the deal. I think Brian Kelly is just I think he's a 10-2 coach. I think that he is. And maybe he gets over that hump with a couple of talented players. They lose Malik Neighbors, they lose Jaden Daniels, obviously. But you got Nussmeier, who's been sitting there for years. The dude's got a cannon, okay? He is a pocket passer and I think a pretty damn good one. You got
Mhm.
some wide receivers coming in. The biggest problem for this team, they could be 20% less productive on offense if their secondary can just stop somebody. And that's something that they're addressing obviously very hard this year. They were very young in some spots in the secondary last year and just flat out not talented in others. But I think that they're going to be able to address that, and I think they're going to be a lot better and a more formidable team and a more well-rounded football team in 2024. Number 7, I got the Mizzou Tigers. You talked about it. You got Cook coming back, Burden coming back, a lot of this talent coming back. I feel like Drinkowitz has got this team on the right trajectory. I think that this is a team that is I don't think last year was a fluke. I think that there has been steady growth at Missouri, and I do think that last year needed to happen because I felt like the leash was getting a little short for Drinkowitz, but I think he's feeling himself, dude. And I think the Missouri Tigers are going to be a formidable team. Not gonna have a running like they had this year. Gonna
Mhm.
have to figure that part out. That was a big part of their offense, obviously, had the leading rusher in the SEC, from last year, so gonna have to figure out how to replace him, but, I think that this Mizzou offense, I think the passing offense should take a step forward and maybe can make up some of that ground for them. Number 6, I got Ole Miss, and this is solely due to the fact that Ole Miss has a returning quarterback in Jackson Dart. That's obviously huge. In college, if you have a returning quarterback, you have a huge leg up in today's college football, I think. And not to mention the talent that they brought in on the defense. I think that that's a big deal. This defense is really complicated. I feel like they've tried to simplify it a little bit. And I feel like it was a little more effective and a little easier to deal with this year for the defensive players at Ole Miss. Still wasn't a great defense. I think they're ready to take a step in the right direction defensively, and I think that's going to help this team a ton. Um, Got to figure out a couple little things on, um, the run game. You said it that Quinshon Judkins is out. They bring in the running back from LSU who was originally at Notre Dame. So I think that they'll be able to be good enough. I don't think that you don't just replace a Judkins. You don't just
Yeah.
get a new Judkins, but I do think that they'll be formidable on offense, and the defense is going to take a step up. Number 5, I've got Michigan. This all changes if Harbaugh leaves, but and the reason I say that is that opens that transfer portal right back up, and I doubt everybody is going to stay on board if there's a head coaching change. I mean, that just doesn't happen these days. Very, very rarely do you see something like that. I think that would be the attraction of Michigan hiring Sharon Moore is the fact that he could probably hold that defense together. This is going to be a really good defense again next year for Michigan. It's going to be an
Mhm.
outstanding defense. The offense is what has the questions. You lose your top 2 running backs, you lose your quarterback. So the question won't be on the defense. I don't think it'll be on the offense, and we'll see what Jim Harbaugh wants to do as far as going to the NFL or what. Number 4, I have Ohio State, and to be honest with you, these top 4 teams, I think you could interchange them. Really, the number 2 through 4 here. I got Ohio State at 4 right now, though, and the reason I do have them at 4 is because of the unknown situation at quarterback. You're bringing in a guy like Will Howard, and with the talent that he's going to have around him, I think that he could be 5% better, than what he was. Just even if he didn't make any kind of leap, I think if you took Will Rogers from last year and put him in Ohio State's offense, I think he would perform better. He had better players around him, no doubt about it. So, how much better though? That's what I need to see, and I don't know yet. This Bill O'Brien offense in college has been successful throwing the football. I don't know that he's going to throw the football to this tune of success that Bryce Young did at Alabama. And I'm not saying he has to, but I got to see what we're working with here. And in this day and age, I'm not completely convinced that Will Howard is going to be the starter all year. You just don't know, dude. You don't know
Mhm.
what Aaron Nolan's about to come in and do. Maybe Julian Sayin comes in and tears it up and ends up being your starter in week 4. Um, there, there's not going to be any loyalty to Will, to the quarterback. So we'll see how that situation handles itself. It'll be a really good run game. We know that with Quinshon Judkins and Henderson. And it's going to be a really good defense with the addition of Caleb Downs and all of the talent that was retained from last year. I know you lose a linebacker and a defensive tackle. I think that those will be pretty easily replaced with the way that Ohio State recruits year in and year out. Number 3, I got Texas. I think Texas takes a step forward on defense. I think that they're probably going to be soul searching a little bit on offense to start the season as you kind of break in some guys that are coming in from new schools. And look, Steve Sarkisian's system is not the easiest one in the world to learn. But luckily enough, this is going to be Quinn Ewers' 3rd year in the system. So how good can Quinn Ewers be in this 3rd year? I think this is it for him. This is the year that it's do or die. And he's gotten incrementally better every year that he's been at Texas, and he's going to have to make that one more step. I wasn't overly impressed with Quinn Ewers in the playoff game. Now he played better at the end of the game, but that first half I was very unimpressed. And is he going to be able to answer the bell with a much higher level of competition this year? They're not playing in the Big 12 no more. They're coming to play with the big dogs in the SEC. And that schedule is brutal. So for me to have Texas here, I obviously have a lot of faith in this team, but the defense is going to have to take a step up. I believe it will. They've went into the transfer portal, brought a lot of talent in. Offensively, who's playing running back? That's one of my biggest questions. I guess it's going to be CJ Baxter, but who else? That you need 2 bell cow backs in the SEC. I feel like they answered all their questions at wide receiver. They lost a lot of wide receivers and they've brought some in. I feel like they've answered the bell there. And now they bring in the tight end from Alabama. They paid him $1.2 million, that Nye Black.
Holy cow.
They paid him $1.2 million. Now, in my opinion, that's not a $1.2 million player. But the Texas Longhorns don't give a shit about my opinion. They got lots of money.
Mhm.
So they're going to do whatever they want. And if it costs them an extra mil, it ain't no big deal. So I don't think Texas is done in the transfer portal. I think that it's possible they have another bell cow running back come in on this team, after spring, whenever that portal opens back up, or even if there's another coaching change, you just never know. Number 2, Oregon. Love Dan Lanning. I think he's on the right trajectory. He made a couple knuckleheaded decisions last year. Okay. So did Nick Saban his first season at Alabama. So did Kirby Smart his first season at Georgia, first couple seasons. Thought he mismanaged some quarterback stuff, speaking about Kirby Smart, that is. So there is a learning curve to this, folks. There's a reason these guys get paid, 8 digits. Not anybody can just step in and do this stuff. And Dan Lanning has got what it takes. He is an outstanding recruiter. He's got Oregon popping. Everybody's buying in. Everybody's watching all the content on YouTube. Everybody's bought into this thing, man. And I think you're right. I think this is a team that is going to continue to bring in as much talent as possible, even through the spring. Can't wait to see them in spring ball and see this quarterback situation. Dylan Gabriel, as he goes, this team will go this season. And this will be the biggest test of his leadership. He will need to step in and be a leader on this offense. And they're going to have to answer a couple questions at wide receiver that they've made. They've acquired talent at the position, but Troy Franklin's gone. He was a badass. Okay,
Mhm.
that's a big guy to replace now. So I think that they can do it. They've got guys coming in. Was Evan Stewart
Mhm.
coming in? I believe he can step right in. This is a top 5 wide receiver in college football, folks. So can we get him acclimated? Can we get him open and get him the ball? That's going to be one of Dylan Gabriel's number one priorities. And number one on this list, as you said, it's not much of a surprise for anybody. The Georgia Bulldogs. They return a pretty much an entire top 10 offense. I mean, minus Brock Bowers, obviously, which is a big deal, but Brock wasn't healthy for half the season. I mean, and if you go look at his numbers, it's not like he had 1,500 yards or something. I mean, this isn't the end of the world for the Georgia Bulldogs. They've got plenty of talent. Um, the defense, I think, is going to be taking a step up this season. I think the overall talent on the defense on the field is going to be higher at a higher level than what it was in 2023. And I don't think this offense is going to skip a beat. And I like your Heisman pick there for Carson Beck. Are those odds out yet?
I feel like I did see something. I don't remember. It's been a couple of weeks since I looked at it, but he's certainly up there. I don't know who's number one.
Well, I think that that's a pretty good bet. I really do. I think this is going to be a really good Georgia squad. The way that this is probably, I think, the best transfer portal class that Georgia's ever had, right? Um, and on top of that, they recruit top 3 in the country every single year in and year out. That's pretty much where Kirby Smart's watermark lies, is about 3rd in the country in recruiting. Um, and this year was no exception. You bring in under number 1 class, so or it looks like you will. We still have a February signing day, but it's looking like Georgia will bring in that number 1 class again. So the talent level's not going down. I think it's actually going up a little bit for Kirby Smart, and you retain all your coaches. You add a great coach from Alabama and Robinson, who's going to be the co-defensive coordinator. Even your co-defensive coordinator that stepped down is still working in the building, going to be an analyst, and Will Muschamp. So I think that all in all, it's been a net gain in the offseason for Georgia. And I can't wait to see all of these teams, man. This is going to be one of the most exciting years. And think about it, all the teams that we just named could make the playoff and there'd still be a couple spots open.
That's
That's
right.
what we're about to deal with in 2024. It's going to be a really fun season. So everybody make sure that you're subscribed. We've got a lot to break down going into the season, and we want you to be a part of the ride. We're going to break down a lot more than the top 10 teams. We're going to break them all down going into the season. So we hope you'll join us in the spring and the fall for that stuff. Mason, what else you got, brother?
That's all I got for today. We'll circle back hopefully Wednesday night. That's kind of the plan, at
Yes.
least, is Wednesday
Yes.
night around 7 Eastern. But keep those notifications on, because we have busy schedules. We don't do this for a living, so we can't always commit to a hard time. But that's tentatively what we're planning for. So stay tuned until then, and I think that's all I got for now.
Yeah, last Wednesday or this past Wednesday, I should say, that was my fault. Double booked myself completely. Not doing that. We're gonna come on Wednesday, and bring you guys the show. We hope that you'll be here, and we appreciate you guys watching and liking the video. Shoot us a comment and let us know what you think about our top 10 lists and our topics that we talked about today. Until Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, I'm Marcus. That's Mason. And for the First and Long College Football Show, we're signing out. Everybody have a great rest of your Sunday and week until Wednesday night. See you then.
Thanks. Y'all take care.